and we're honored to have you on tonight. And I do not, I'll be honest, I do not know a whole lot about Agenda 21. And if you would maybe start out kind of doing kind of like 101, make it kind of simple, and then we can progress from there, because there's so many people that hear Agenda 21 and say, I have no idea. So let's maybe start with the basic explanation, and then we can go in deeper from there, if you don't mind, sir.
Yeah, that sounds fine. And I like your strategy for bringing in new listeners. That sounds like a great plan, too. But basically, to give you a quick rundown on Agenda 21, it's a UN program that these people came up with back in 1992 in Rio. And I would actually encourage everybody to go to Google, type in Agenda 21, and read the United Nations documents about this program, because it sounds so outrageous when you say it or when you hear somebody talking about it on the radio. But I encourage everybody, just go to Google, type in UN Agenda 21, go to the United Nations website, and read about it yourself. Because what they're talking about here is literally transforming human civilization from the top down in every possible way. And so they've used different justifications. First it was the global warming, then the climate change, now it's the sustainable development. More recently it became poverty. So the justifications for Agenda 21 are constantly shifting, whatever these people think they'll be able to use to sell this scheme. But to put it in a nutshell, you could say it's an attack on private property rights. It's an attack on national sovereignty. What they want is kind of a centralized control system with the UN in charge and national governments implementing UN orders. They want to abolish private land ownership, and they admit this in their documents. So you might think this sounds ridiculous. Just go to Google, type in United Nations Agenda 21, and read their documents. They openly say they want to abolish private land ownership. According to the UN, it contributes to social injustice and concentration of wealth and all these other evil things. So basically, it's central planning disguised as a movement for what they call sustainable development. And when you say sustainable development, people's eyes kind of glaze over. What does that even mean? It sounds nice. It sounds warm and fuzzy. But when the UN talks about sustainable development, again, go read their documents. They're very clear about what they mean. They're talking about a top-down, centrally planned global order run by them. And it's kind of a weird thing that you see going on here. You see the kind of the big business that the left likes to demonize. Just the other day I was writing an article about how Monsanto joined a global business alliance to support UN Agenda 21. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have communist dictators who are also supporting Agenda 21. So I was in Rio last year for the UN Sustainable Development Summit, 20 years after they first came up with Agenda 21. And the chair of the conference was a Chinese Communist Party official, and he, just as communist as any other communist ruler in China. So they're actually more fascist than communists, but they're still from the Communist Party. Just last week, you had Raul Castro when he took over this regional Latin American group called CELAC, the Community of Latin American and Caribbean Nations. He was talking about imposing sustainable development. So you have this kind of strange, at least on the surface it seems strange, alliance between big business, communist dictators, and our government working with the United Nations to impose this, what they describe as a global order with central economic planning. They want you to be consuming less. They want, they want people to consume less goods and services under the guise of whether it be environmentalism or alleviating poverty or climate change, any kind of excuse they can think of. So that's kind of in a nutshell what Agenda 21 is.
Let me ask you, could you trace or could you describe, I guess, the structure as far as, how it gets handed down? I've always wondered, it originates from the UN, but then does it go through, I guess it goes through our government, and then from our government it fans out to states, where the states write legislation. Could you go into tell me how that works?
Sure. Well, the way the treaties are typically supposed to work, at least the way the Constitution describes, is the Senate with a 2/3 majority, is supposed to ratify a treaty for it to become the law of the land in the United States. Obviously, a treaty can't override the Constitution, so ratifying Agenda 21 would be meaningless anyways as far as the Constitution is concerned, because the U.S. government doesn't have the power to do these things that the United Nations is asking for. But if it were done properly, the Senate would ratify this treaty, and the U.S. government would start implementing it. The way it's actually working, though, the Senate has never ratified this. The first George Bush signed the treaty back in 1992 in Rio, and right away they started working on it. He got all the executive agencies working on it, and then the UN operates various front groups, the primary one in terms of Agenda 21 being a group called ICLEI. They changed their name to ICLEI. It used to be the International Council of Local Environmental Initiatives. So this is supposed to be a non-profit, non-governmental organization based in Germany. And what they do is they work with state and local governments to implement these kinds of plans at the local level. And a lot of times it sounds, very innocuous, very innocent. They want to make more green spaces or protect more wetlands, or, they give all kinds of nice-sounding excuses for doing what they're doing. But the way that they're really implementing it in the United States is, first of all, through the executive branch. Obama is working fiendishly to do this. He's got his EPA working overtime to implement Agenda 21. And then coordinating at the state level using grant money, they're coercing states into adopting these kinds of programs. And even at the city and the county level, they're doing the same thing. So even though the Senate never ratified this agreement, which would be required under our Constitution, they are still implementing it full speed in the United States. We have had some major victories against Agenda 21 at the state and local level, which is encouraging. Dozens at least of cities and counties have dropped out of ICLEI. They've ended their membership with that organization. Last year, we even had Alabama became the first state to officially ban Agenda 21. So Agenda 21 is now unlawful in the state of Alabama. Every Republican and every Democrat in the legislature voted in favor of the ban, and the governor finally signed it. So Agenda 21 is illegal in Alabama. But if you're not in Alabama, chances are somewhere, some local government, some county government, maybe your state government, definitely the federal government is working to implement Agenda 21 in your area. And you can see the signs of this all over the place. If you pay close attention to what your state and local governments are doing, you'll see that they're buying up massive amounts of land. Obviously, then this land becomes pretty much off limits to the public, and it's all under the guise of saving the environment and being sustainable for future generations. Sure. And all this. So that's how they're really implementing it, even though they have absolutely no lawful authority to be doing it.
Sure. Well, why was Alabama able to sniff it out and ban it, whereas other states have not been able, to certainly gain the necessary support, and awareness that Alabama did?
Well, you do see right now a lot of action taking place at the state level across the country to tackle Agenda 21. So you had other states, like Tennessee is one example that comes to mind. They passed a resolution last year calling Agenda 21 socialist communist plot to redistribute wealth, to strip the United States of its national sovereignty, a scheme that is at odds with American traditions of liberty and self-government and the Constitution. So we are seeing some action at the state level as legislators get more informed about this, and at the county level as well. But the problem is there just hasn't been a big enough critical mass. Most people in the United States still don't even know what Agenda 21 is. So to try to get legislators to act on this, there needs to be public pressure. So people need to go to town hall meetings. People need to go meet their state representatives and their congressmen and light a fire under them and say, get working on this. We don't want this in our area. So, the national GOP, the National Republican Party, added as an official part of its platform that we reject Agenda 21. We urge all Republican officials to reject Agenda 21 and work against it. But at the moment, you have the establishment wing of the Republican Party, if you want to call it that, George Bush, the first president, the Karl Roves, these types, So they like the idea of Agenda 21. George Bush the first is actually the one who set it in motion, at least for the United States. And then you have the establishment wing of the Democrat Party that also supports this. So until enough citizens get involved, until enough citizens go tell their lawmakers that they need to stop this right now, they're going to keep imposing it on us. So
okay. Well, I'm still in bewilderment of Alabama, of all places, for the citizens to be necessarily more aware, or at least maybe there was a little more conviction, within the populace of Alabama in order to overturn it. But I think a lot of times, at least me being from Texas, our biggest problem is what do we tackle first? What do we go after first? Part of their, I guess, strength is being organized at the top, and us being so disorganized, and having to fight from the bottom. So, I think a lot of things will reach critical mass and we'll be able to overturn it. But it seems like, at least in Texas, it really hadn't gained, the awareness that it takes in order to overturn it. And that's why I was just asking, what did Alabama do, that was so different, from what Texas has been able to do, so far. So.
Well, there have been some victories in Texas, actually. Last year, I think I covered at least 3 different cities that withdrew from ICLEI, so those were all major victories. The Texas GOP officially added as part of its platform, they adopted a resolution rejecting Agenda 21, calling it a socialist, communist plot that is an attack on America, an attack on American sovereignty and our Constitution. So we have seen some minor victories in Texas, but until more activists get involved, until more people start speaking out about it and educating their neighbors and their friends and their city councilmen and their state lawmakers, we're not going to see enough progress, the kind of progress that we need to see. So in Alabama, there were a couple of organizations that really made this a top priority issue. And the law in Alabama actually is genius. The way it was written, it's just a genius bill. So if there's any lawmakers listening, I would recommend they take a look at the bill that was passed into law in Alabama for inspiration. But there are still some elements of the Democratic Party and, like I said, the establishment of the Republican Party that are fighting against any efforts to expose or stop Agenda 21. And so that's where the real problem is. That you might have some Democrats, they take right out of the Alinsky Rules for Radicals, try to ridicule this. Some of them even claim it's a conspiracy theory, which is so absurd to anybody who has Google and can type United Nations Agenda 21. You can read all of their documents and what they're saying. So there's no conspiracy theory here. There's nothing like that. But ridicule can be a potent weapon, and the insiders or the establishment, if you want to call them that, you can tell that they're already resorting to these types of tactics. And it's just a matter of getting enough people educated and enough people involved for us to stop this thing. And like I said, we've seen some victories. We just need to start seeing some more. So.
Yeah. Well, what got you? I mean, I've got my pet issue is the Federal Reserve. I feel like the Federal Reserve, somewhat is kind of the brain center, or at least the heart of the whole system. And that's why I'm always been, certainly in the last 5-6 years, so adamant and outspoken against the Federal Reserve. But what got you, into, certainly being such someone so motivated against, UN Agenda 21?
Well, I agree with you 100% about the Federal Reserve being, if not the primary problem, one of the top problems that we're facing right now as a nation. We absolutely must get rid of the Federal Reserve. But what really got me interested in Agenda 21, it was years ago, actually, when I was at the University of Florida in 2007. I noticed that I was running a little local newspaper down there with a couple of college friends, and we noticed that the county and the city and the state were buying up all of this land, and suddenly people couldn't go on it anymore. So we started digging into it and, looking into what was behind it, and before long we found out that, okay, this isn't just, a localized thing that's affecting the city that we were in, the county that we were in. This is a global thing. This is something being pushed by the United Nations. So that's where I figured out about it. Then I came across, the Birch Society's materials about it. They have a lot of good research and a lot of good information. And the New American Magazine, I work as a foreign correspondent for the New American Magazine. And so they've asked me to cover some of these issues. I went to the UN Global Warming Summit in Copenhagen. And then I went, like I said, to the summit in Rio last year, the UN Sustainable Development Summit on the 20th anniversary of Agenda 21. And so that's how I kind of got really motivated, to start exposing this, to start educating people about it, and to start working to defeat it. But I couldn't agree more with you that the Federal Reserve is, if not the top issue, right up there with the top issues. And they're all interrelated. It's, when you really look behind the scenes, when you pull back the curtain, you see that the same people that are running the Federal Reserve and the fiat monetary system and the debt slavery system, it's the same people that are trying to build this global order under the United Nations.
Sure. No, it's a huge web, and it's just unbelievable in how many layers and how thick. And that's the thing. I mean, I can't believe that the average person just doesn't see it for what it is. It's so. I mean, I don't know if it's just because it's just too much information, and their little, hamster wheel brains can't comprehend it. But it's just amazing to me that people at least don't accept and go research, some of the stuff that's being said. So.
Yeah. Well, it's a combination. I mean, it's there's a lot of people that, just trying to get their hands around, their arms around, their minds around, even just what's so boldly in our faces that we're facing with the second term of this administration, let alone trying to get to Agenda 21. I mean, I admit, I really, this is 101 for me. By the way, gentlemen, we have James joining us. Welcome, James.
Hey, thank you. Just real briefly, my experience, Alex, as a legislator and as a city board member on multiple boards, is I had actually seen the federal government guide the county planning commission and city planning through essentially saying we're going to allow these grants to go through provided that you build in these manners, that your development of certain communities has roads that are enticing to bicyclists and people walking and that type of thing. And is that not really how so much of this gets through, is the promise or the allure of the free money? So
yes, exactly. You just hit the nail right on the head. It's the federal grants that are really guiding the state and county and city policymakers to do this kind of stuff. And if they resist, then the federal government says, okay, well, there goes your grant money. And so that's a scary prospect for cities and states that have come to depend on federal dollars. So they've really got this scam running in a way where you're screwed if you do, you're screwed if you don't. But it's interesting to hear that was your experience as a lawmaker as well, because the federal government is handing out grants not just in this area, in basically every area of our lives. They're attacking us using our own tax money to get our state governments, our local police departments to serve the federal government instead of the local citizens, the constituents, and the taxpayers.
Yeah, and one of the things I experienced is, when you would stand up and say, well, fine, let's turn the money down. Too often, elected officials are scared that, okay, if they don't use it, that means someone else will use it. And that might be the case, but the fact is it takes men of character or women of character to sit here and say, no, we're not going to take the blood money. And if someone else wants to, then so be it. But maybe some people will learn and follow by example. By the way, Alabama is still listed on, or at least 3 cities in Alabama are still listed on ICLEI's site.
Yeah, ICLEI seems to have that problem. They don't seem to keep a very updated list because I know for a fact I've seen numerous cities and counties pull out of ICLEI, and they keep them up on the website for a year, 2 years afterwards. Even when members of the city council contact them and tell them to remove their city from the list, they don't take it down. So.
Yeah,
I think they like to overestimate their number of members, and I don't think they want people to realize that they're bleeding membership like crazy right now.
And I do know of several cities that are members that have requested their name be removed, and their name has been removed even though they are members, because they do try to avoid the spotlight. So I'm glad you came on the show. That's really kind of the 2 points I wanted to ask. I need to get back to my hot tea and sickness. So thank you for coming, and I'll be listening in.
Okay. Thanks for having me on.
You still there, Alex?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay. Now, so if I was in the elevator, what would be your elevator speech that I can pretty much rehearse and start, memorizing and repeating to anybody that I find?
I just usually urge people to do their own research, because the fact is this isn't hidden. This isn't some kind of shadowy thing that nobody can know about. If anybody who has a computer and who has an internet connection can go online and find out what the UN is saying. You can read through their documents. And I think after people see that this is out in the open, they see what the UN says they want to do. It's completely at odds with everything that America stands for. So once people see with their own eyes that the UN says they want to do these things, then, it's a deal breaker. When people realize that, they don't want anything more to do with it, and then they'll get active. So, you just explain to people the basic points. Your private property rights are under threat from this program. The private ownership of land is under threat from this program. They want to pack people into compact, quote-unquote, sustainable cities. If you live in suburbia, if you live out in a rural area, do you want to end up living like a sardine in a compact, so-called sustainable city? Do you want your quality of life, your standard of living to go down under the guise of, quote-unquote, sustainability, so that these elitist fat cats can get richer while everybody else gets poorer? And any normal, rational person would say, no, that doesn't sound like a good idea. Our country's based on the idea of private property and individual liberty. The UN Agenda 21 represents the exact opposite of those things. So if you don't want our country to go down that road, then, you need to get involved. And the UN should be a primary target of all patriots, so should the Federal Reserve. We were talking a little bit earlier about why people don't know about these issues, about the Federal Reserve and about what the United Nations is up to. And that goes to right to the heart of the problem as well, and that's the media. The media has been covering up for these people for so long, and now we have the alternative media. Now we have radio shows like this. We have, the internet, where you can go find out anything you want. You can access any documents you want. We have all kinds of alternative media outlets that are popping up. And so now we have more access to information. So now what we need to do is unplug people from the TV and from, their New York Times or Gannett-owned newspaper, and get them to go find alternative sources of information, or just go to the primary documents themselves. Go see what the Federal Reserve says in its court filing. So go read the court filing where the Federal Reserve Bank of New York said it's a private corporation and not subject to Freedom of Information Act requests. Go read the United Nations documents that say private land ownership contributes to social injustice and should be abolished. And when people see that, it can be scary at first, but once they get over the initial, hysterical paranoia or, oh my goodness, there's nothing I can do about this, I'm just going to keep my head down, that's when people start getting active. That's when people start doing what they need to do, running for office, contacting their lawmakers, writing a blog. There's all kinds of things that people can do. So once people are educated, once they're unplugged from this bogus reality that's created by, the network TV stations and the major newspapers, it's a lot easier to accomplish our objectives, preserving freedom in the United States, preserving the U.S. Constitution, restoring sound money, and protecting private property rights and individual liberty.
Sure. Well, to me, it's actually somewhat easy. I think most people just don't realize how powerful they are. And there's been many things that I've been involved in that we've, at least on a local level, we've been able to, somewhat change, or at least, gain some type of awareness. And, I watched one time, there was a ex-CIA, and he was talking about, the best way to defeat what's going on, and that is just to make everybody aware. We're basically fighting a 1970s, type mindset and methodology in how they're doing this. And, what they didn't and what they weren't prepared for is they weren't prepared for people being able to, certainly get together and expose as much information as that has been out. So as long as we let, it breathe air, from the standpoint of what truth, does, it's going to take a life, and it's going to certainly be, very capable, of just, stomping out any of this. I do believe that, really, I'm not saying we're winning, but it's not about winning. It's just about getting at people's consciousness where they start talking about it. And I've been just lucky to where I've brought up certain subjects just with people that I would think would not know about it, and they've basically they hit it out of the ballpark. And it's good, and it's good to see that, and you just never know where it's going to come from. But to me, it's happening more and more, because 5-6 years ago, I felt like that I was on an island, and most people around me that certainly were my friends and all that, were looking at me like I was, certainly, a couple beers short of a six-pack. They just really did. They looked at me, and I just. Anyway, it became a yelling match sometimes. But the same people. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, I was in the same. Chad and I or Mendingo and I have had many, many conversations. I was in the same, trying to get people to listen. I wasn't to the level of certainly a lot of the topics that we talk about today, but I was just trying to get them to understand when they talked about change, what kind of change, and they couldn't even get their minds around what I was trying to tell them. They told me I was crazy. When I Google search Agenda 21 in North Dakota, it actually comes up and it brings Montana. And then it gives the map of Montana, and it says to click on the region that you live in to see the projects that are going on for Agenda 21. And then it talks about says the honest truth is that our small towns in Montana are struggling to make ends meet, so are many Montanans. So it's talking about, additionally, some towns accepted grant money and have completed their projects and are only now finding that they do not have the funds to comply with their end of the bargain, those pesky strings. They're now dealing with either the strong arm of the federal government pushing them hard or well-funded environmental groups with a huge pool of legal resources that are making their lives miserable. And then it talks about that. Through their small towns in Montana are struggling to make ends meet. So many Montanans, many folks have
Are you reading this?
Yeah, many. Because I said, she told me to Google it. And so I said I head to North Dakota or Wyoming just to be able to support their families in an economic climate where I get apparently Agenda 21 projects are not very strong in Montana, because when I Googled it, it came up with Montana. Wanted to add that.
Okay, that's interesting. But but back to what you were saying, Chad. Truth really is a very powerful weapon, and now that truth is so easily accessible, now that we have the internet, I really see it as kind of a monkey wrench in their plans. So now the truth is accessible to anybody who has an internet connection, which is virtually the entire country, and like you said, people don't really realize the influence that they can have just taking small actions. Like, how many people that go visit their state legislator? Your state legislature is enormously influential. If you go and you meet with your state legislator and you tell him what your concerns are and what you want him to do, they take that seriously generally. They want to be reelected. They know not a lot of people are paying attention, so they want to make sure to please the people that are paying attention, because that's the people who, may or may not end up making or breaking them at the next election. So the power of the individual is huge. Go ahead.
People just became aware, the county sheriffs, have somewhat power. I mean, I can't believe they're just awoke to that fact. But I mean, that's why certainly there was a huge debate about how much power county sheriffs should have. But they've had this power all along.
Yeah, they're the top law enforcement officers in their county. That's another thing I've been doing, is encourage people to go meet with their local sheriff, find out where they stand on gun control. Do they stand with their oath of office and their constituents? Will they protect the Second Amendment, or will they serve a lawless regime and follow the dictates of a president who apparently has no respect for his oath of office and no respect for the Constitution that gave him authority in the first place? So just going to meet with your sheriff and going to meet with your city councilman, whatever, the power that's behind that is really huge. And if you get some of your neighbors to do the same, you form, a local citizens committee, the influence that regular citizens can have is just enormous if they would just, spend a little bit of time out of their day doing something for their country, something for the cause of liberty.
Very well said. So what, besides you and Agenda 21, just a personal question, do you live in Sweden, or are you just, there looking at Swedish models?
Actually, I have a Swedish wife, so that's why we spend a big part of the year here. But and so that's why I'm here right now as well. But we're still looking at places to move. We're going to be heading back to the States in a couple of months and maybe settling down somewhere around there, or maybe living kind of a nomadic lifestyle for a little while until we find a good place to settle down. But we're definitely going to be back in the States within a few months to, see if we can.
Why hurry back? I mean, you're in Sweden. You have a Swedish wife. I mean,
but the Swedish wife will come with me, right? So that part is solved.
Exactly. I mean, geez. I mean, what a lucky dude. I mean, that's like better than the puppy with two peckers. I mean, what do you? Yeah, don't confuse yourself with it. God, what's wrong?
But Sweden has a really a positive reputation abroad. But I don't think they deserve it. Sweden is a very strange country. The government, I mean, if you think Obama is progressive, you have no idea until you've seen the Swedish government. Their version of the right wing is to the left of Obama. So it's, it almost feels like a lost cause here. A libertarian in Sweden is more akin to a far left liberal Democrat in the United States. There are some real principled libertarians, but they're so few and far between. Very few conservatives. They're hostile to Christianity. They love the UN. They just banned homeschooling, of all things. So, Sweden has a good reputation, but it's not all that great of a place, in my opinion. So, America.
No, I was just talking about the women. I feel like those countries, have almost hit the snooze bar to life, and they've almost kind of just allowed everything to go, because really it hadn't, they haven't had to go through. Just everything that we've gone through. I mean, we go through wars, we go through unbelievable, certain things that are being done to us. So there's a lot more, I guess, there. And then, of course, it's, the entrenched idea of freedom and liberty, does come here. And most Europeans that I've ever met, have said that really, even though we may be going to a fascist state, we still, certainly hold it dear, based on wanting to be free and doing something about it. But
yeah, that's the great thing about America, is that even average people, they understand free speech, they understand gun rights. In Europe, you don't have any of that. You have people walking around thinking they have free speech, and at the same time, it's like doublethink out of George Orwell. They put Christian preachers in jail here if they preach against homosexuality, for example. And at the same time, if you ask a Swedish person, do you have free speech? They'll say, oh, of course we have free speech. We can say anything we want, except, this hate speech, this speech, this speech, this speech. So they've really created kind of like a doublethink mindset in the population. And it seems to me like all the liberty-minded Swedish people and all the liberty-minded Norwegians, they escaped to the U.S., over the last 200 years. So they're all living in the States already.
Sure. Yeah, well, but there are a lot of beautiful women there, right? Just come on.
That's true. Yeah, you can't argue with that.
Just give me an escape. All right. Well, I mean, so where do you think you're going to end up when you come back to the States?
We're looking at Colorado right now. I saw today with some dismay that they just got some more gun control legislation out of the House, so that's discouraging. But Colorado seems like a nice place. I'm from Florida originally, so we'll probably spend some time there at the very least. And maybe we'll make a road trip. Maybe we'll even come through North Dakota and see what it's like up there. So.
Well, it's just not much. Yeah, I mean, if you blink, you've still seen, the whole. I'm kidding. No, I mean, what you got to do is, come down to Texas. I mean, that's where you get people like me that think we can solve the world's problems and go do something about it. But there's certainly a different, even to the X degree, based on how independent Texans feel. So. One question, did you see something about what did the Colorado do today that talked about legislation about if some lady was raped, or if a girl is raped, then basically that they advocate, because they passed that gun control law, that they advocate that the woman, basically vomit, or pee on herself, so the attacker would not make her, would leave her alone.
Yeah, I saw that, and it looked like the doofus that suggested that retracted his silly statement pretty quickly. But that should give people some insight into the mindset of these people that want to take your guns. Defend yourself from a rapist by peeing on yourself. It's such a wacky mindset that these people have. So I mean, they're doing our job for us. They're discrediting themselves. They're making themselves look foolish. So just let them keep talking, and they'll keep embarrassing themselves and making our point for us. So.
You seem like is that where you got most of your knowledge? Is basically covering the New American, and certainly you described how you started out. But I guess you do this on a daily basis from the standpoint of picking up what's going on and having to write about it or report about it?
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty much what I do all day, is follow the news, write about the news, those types of things. So I stay pretty up to date with current affairs, especially on topics that I'm focused on, like the United Nations, like the Federal Reserve. Gun control is one that I've been writing a lot about recently, just because it's such a hot topic, and I mean it's such a serious issue too. If they get the guns, that's not a good sign. So.
Yeah, well, England wants every person, every society, they come to this realization because they're basically being run over, roughshod, and they know that they can't do anything about it because the government, has all the guns, and that is, to me, that is the biggest fight. And I've certainly, I trumpet the Federal Reserve, I trumpet so many other topics and all that, but really for the last month, 2 months. That's all I've written about, is pointing out, some of the, false flag type attacks, some of the things that have happened in order to get us to that stage to where that's what they want to do. So.
Yeah. And when you look behind the curtain, you see that all of this is related. It's not a very large group of people that's orchestrating this. It's, a handful of really rich, banking dynasties and different individuals. There's real people behind this, and it's a pretty small network of people. We outnumber them probably 1,000,000 to 1. So, it's just to get people educated, get people activated, expose, what these people are up to, and educate people about the principles of the Constitution and liberty, and that's how we win the fight. And now we have some new valuable tools like the internet. Truth, again, is a very, very powerful weapon. Sometimes people don't like to hear the truth, but the truth sets you free. So find out what the truth is. It's a simple concept, and, like you said, we may not be winning yet, but we do have a lot of big things on our side, and truth is one of them. And so that gives me hope that in the end we'll probably come out on top. It's hard to predict where this is all going to go, but there is a lot of positive things happening, even amid all the bad news and Obama's second term, and now he's coming for the guns. And at the same time, this gun control push, it's caused an awakening of so many people who otherwise wouldn't get off the couch, wouldn't care what's going on. When they say they're coming for the guns, you get a lot of people that otherwise wouldn't be paying attention who are suddenly activated. So each time
Sure.
they push us another step further, we get more and more activists, more and more patriots who are ready to get involved and help defend the republic. So
yeah. Well, I mean, are most of your friends on board, or do they kind of think, hey, that's great, Alex, and go back to watching Sports Center?
That's a good question. In the States, most of my friends, they understand. In Sweden, a lot of them do, because I think I just have a natural tendency to gravitate toward like-minded people who who are more educated and more aware of what's going on. But I know for a fact that there's millions of Americans who are awake, who are really upset about this. And so if you just watch TV all day, you'd never know it. But if you just go out and talk to your neighbors, you'll see that we are the majority. Even if people don't know what Agenda 21 is, or if they don't understand how the Federal Reserve works, if they did, they would be on our side. And so their values, their principles, they're good people. They just want to live their lives in peace with their family. And so maybe they have a little bit of trouble grappling with the kind of the danger that we're facing, because they can't understand how there would be people who really, just want to rule over them. Normal people don't have this urge to rule over other people. But once people figure out what's going on, I mean, they're in our camp. It's almost never, I think, that somebody figures out, like, hey, there's, these forces that are trying to set up a global government and they're running this scam of a monetary system. They want to take your private property away. How many people do you know that would say, oh, well, that sounds like a good idea. I think I'll get involved and help support that. It's nobody, unless they're hoping to benefit personally. But those aren't the kind of people that we would want on our side anyways. So. Sure.
Well, how do you, when you explain, I a lot of times, you just got to figure it out. There's always, when you kind of explain, you're just kind of afraid that there's going to be something that where their eyes go in the back of their head and then they stop listening. I stay away. You talked about individuals up top. I refer those guys to being the Illuminati or really just bankers. Some of the Rockefeller, Rothschild, type families and all that. But I think a lot of times I can't even mention that. So I just, again, to me, it's always been, because of my understanding in finance and the monetary system, that's always been the best way for me to, get to where I can get someone to hear, because everybody I know gets up and works, and when I explain to them that they're going to work that much harder, their lifestyle is going to be that much less, they don't understand it. That seems to be the way I get people understanding things. Do you find any other way of doing it, besides just being educated about, these certain topics?
Yeah, I think what you said is right on the money. A lot of times I find that I kind of have to take it in small doses. Like I have, childhood friends that I try to bring up some of these topics with, and you can tell, like you said, their eyes glaze over and they really don't understand what you're talking about. So you just plant little seeds in there, and then they'll hear something another time, and they'll think back to what you said, and little by little they'll come around. But it's true that if you come at somebody with, if you confront somebody all of a sudden with all of this information, it's so shocking that they might even go into, this kind of like natural defense mechanism where you just say, no, that can't possibly be true. That would, that can't be. But, and it depends a lot on the person too. If it's a Christian, tell them read your Bible. Your Bible explains these things very clearly. If it's somebody who understands, finance and banking, talk to them about the Federal Reserve. If it's somebody who's a rancher, explain to them, how their private property rights are under threat. You can go straight to the UN documents. There's a UN report, Habitat 1, where they explicitly say that they want to abolish private land ownership. So find people's key issues. Don't overload them with information, because once they get a whiff of it, they'll start looking for the information on their own. And so, once you've gotten somebody to that point, your job is done. They'll educate themselves, they'll buy books, they'll do what they need to do to get informed, and then they'll go out and tell other people, and they'll get involved, and they'll go meet with their legislators. And so it's kind of like a domino effect. You just get people started, and then they'll take it from there a lot of the time, I think. So.
Sure.
And also, when I think about, when I look at, I'm being from Minneapolis, when I first started talking about, just when you're talking about, look at what we're facing now with our administration, without going as deep as, the Federal Reserve and the other topics that we talk about. When I first started trying to talk to people about it, when I mentioned amnesty, they thought I was talking about another country. When I explained to them, all of the different agendas, it was so hard to even grasp, because we're living in unique times. We are living in unique times in that, and I always go back to this, look at the pressures and stresses that are on the citizens right now in this country right now. We are at an economic point that people still can't, even just economically, they still can't get their minds around how is it we're still not only stalled out, but we're so far behind where we should be for what this country was sold on, and the amount of stress and pressures just trying to go about and do their job and feed their families, keep their homes, doing the things that to them 5 years ago, that they thought that by now we'd be facing, as we would say, golden days. If the stimulus was supposed to work, our GDP is supposed to be, 5-6%, not where it's at. We're not supposed to be watching the TV and watching that any moment the dollar is going to devalue, and people can't even get the concept of buying silver and gold, let alone even to try and get them to understand we have an administration in place that we haven't had before. So, of course, we can all agree, coming full force at them, I've experienced just trying to get into some of the basics of trying to get them to understand just what was going to happen to this country. And then, sometimes you get down the road, and certainly I experienced it when a lot of new things came to me. In the beginning, I looked at some of just the fundamental things that were going to dismantle this country. Like, did I go through the fear stage? Certainly, even, there were times in this show when people had me convinced that by now, how many people came out and told me that the grid was going to be down, we wouldn't even have basic essentials for life, we'd all be locked up in FEMA camps, and, our guns were going to be taken from us by now, and that we'd be beyond what the Great Depression was. I ran around. I was very, very fearful when a lot of the conspiracy theorists would come on and hijack my show. So you try and then talk to somebody that doesn't even want to even believe, and yet I look at it this way: from the very beginning, when it was just me happy that one or two people were listening, word of mouth, look at where we are today. We still are kind of banging our heads going, how come some of these people don't, why aren't they seeing it? Why can't they? Well, we're getting there. 2 years ago, did I know what Agenda 21 was? No. Did one more person listen tonight and say, okay, they're making sense. There's something that I'm going to dig into. I'm going to start to research. And that's how we gain the momentum, and we gain one more person, and we get them listening. And I guarantee that none of us thought 5 years ago, certainly I didn't think that I'd be sitting, well, right now I got to add a little bit of humor, because if I've been quiet, which I've actually, Mendingo, I can't believe you didn't ding a bell and say you broke a record for silence. Come on. You had to have. I know you were thinking it, because
I was my eyes were welling up. I was basically ecstatic. I was glad that I just did not hear the melancholy of your chatter. So anyway.
Listen, I had to. You know what? So James is telling me, ask this question, ask that, and right now, gentlemen, as I'm talking, because I said to James, I said, you know what? I have missed the show so much that even though it is like minus 25 outside, I got to my camper tonight. Yes, Alex, I live in a 40-foot camper here in Williston, North Dakota, and Grasshopper was supposed to kind of be looking over it. Well, I have no power, I have no propane, I have no heat, and so I said earlier my feet are cold, but I put my steel-toe boots back on. I have one space heater in front of me, and so I muted the phone because I thought, I just don't know that I want to be here in the middle of the night when then I'd probably blow another circuit for the space heater because, sometimes you might just have to go to a motel room and imagine, Mendingo, the people that I could talk to tonight, I could just burn off that excess energy even more tonight so I'm back to my little bit, subdued self tomorrow.
Alex, you talked about earlier, you were talking about Monsanto?
Yeah, the GMO company, yeah.
Yeah, you linked it, though, somehow with UN Agenda 21. What exactly? I know everything's got certainly a relationship and all that, but I was just curious. What did Monsanto have to do with UN Agenda 21?
The reason I brought it up is just because it was a very recent news item that I think it's actually one news bulletin point or whatever that you can use to bring leftists into this cause as well. Because there are already, like I said, a lot of Democrats that are opposed to Agenda 21. But, a lot of liberals and lefties, they have a special passionate hate for companies like Monsanto. It's a big business. They make, this controversial product. They sue little farmers if their fields get contaminated. So a lot of leftists have a special hatred for Monsanto. I'm no fan of Monsanto. But it was earlier this month that I wrote the article, February 4th. But they just joined a group called, let me see, I have the article in front of me here. It's the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. So this is a group, it's a coalition of mega corporations, mega international corporations. And when I say mega international corporations, I mean the top of the top. It's the Bank of America, the Deutsche Bank, the big pharmaceutical companies, the big oil companies. And that's ironic, too, when you tell the leftists that the big oil, you got Chevron as part of this, you got Petrobras, the Brazilian energy company, you've got Shell, you've got Novartis. So this World Business Council for Sustainable Development, Monsanto just announced that it was joining, and so the Alliance and Monsanto both were celebrating how great it was that now Monsanto was joining the UN Sustainability Club. And if you go over this organization's website, it's plastered all over the place. Agenda 21, the evolution of humanity and civilization, and all of this, the standard Agenda 21 nonsense. But that's why I mentioned Monsanto, just because they just happen to have joined this big business coalition for Agenda 21, and it's a very strange kind of alliance. You would never expect, if you look at things through the traditional interpretation, through the way a regular person understands things, it wouldn't make any sense for communist dictators like the Castro brothers and the Chinese Communist Party to be working with Bank of America and Monsanto for the same goal. But yet here they are, all working for UN Agenda 21 Sustainable Development. So the chances are, if the communist dictators want it and the big banks want it, it's not going to be good for us little people.
Sure. I read a guy, and it's Divine Cosmos. And there's a gentleman that I've been reading some of his stuff, and he published an article that probably was the best I've seen explaining the whole relationship between all the financial banks and all the corporations. And the gentleman's name was David Wilcock. Have you read any of his information?
I'm not sure. Is he the guy out in Zurich who did the study about how all the major international companies are interlocking? Is that who you're talking about? I might be totally off.
He may have. That may be the one you're talking about. He he started with, and keep in mind, you have to understand his site. I mean, he's talking about, expanded consciousness. He's talking about, certainly something that would not be, you would think that you would find on his site. But his information has just been unbelievable based on, his writing about financial interlocking type relationships. And to me, it's such a, it connects better than I've seen in a while of, and he wrote, I think the particular article in question he was talking about the LIBOR scandal. And the LIBOR scandal has been at least somewhat bigger in Europe than it has in the United States. But the LIBOR scandal pretty much, shows, that these corporations, are absolutely, 100%, just all together and act unanimously, when some major direction needs, to happen. And so if you get some time, I mean, just type his name in. I think his website's Divine Cosmos, and kind of look at some of his information. And I think, it's like anything. The more information you read, I mean, I feel like I've been on a 5-year crash course, and I'm still not, ready to take the test. But it's really good information. So if you get a chance, I think it'll
I'll
maybe
definitely
explain.
check it out. David Wilcox, huh?
Yeah. So I think you'll have a lot of meat. That I mean, there's so many paths to go down, and I mean, I'm sure you have a hard time being a writer that you're almost like, I feel like I'm leaving something out, from what you're intending, to write about. But that's amazing that you're able to at least, comprehend and get it across in the first place.
Yeah, it's always like that. There's so much going on that deserves attention, and so little time, so much that needs to be read, so much that needs to be understood. But and even in an individual article or an individual radio program, you can never, unfortunately, go into everything. But hopefully, like we were talking about earlier, you just plant little seeds of truth, and they'll grow, and people will start going out on their own and doing their own research and figuring out what they need to know. And I think there are a lot of reasons to be encouraged. So I know there's a lot of pessimism and doom and gloom among the conservative movement, and I don't doubt at all that the economy is heading for some really serious problems, and that the country is heading for some really serious problems. But at the same time, we can't overlook, all of the encouraging things, like the amount of people that are getting involved, the amount of people that are getting educated. And I think that as they move further along with their plan, you're going to see more and more people, who are affected. They're going to wake up and say, oh, my goodness, what's going on here? And so, this movement to restore freedom, to restore the Constitution, I think is just going to keep growing. And, Obama might almost be a blessing in disguise, and that might sound like heresy to Republicans, but look at how many conservatives have gotten off the couch and have woken up and have gotten involved. If Romney had won, a lot of them might have just gone right back to sleep. And Romney may have been a better president, I don't know. But if he had won, this whole conservative movement that's waking up right now might very well have just gone right back to sleep. And the country would keep heading in the same direction, maybe a little bit slower. But, we still would have been going in the same general direction. And so in the end, I think there's a lot to be hopeful about. So
you're completely right, Alex. I mean, why did the Tea Party come about? Because both parties let us down. Why did the libertarians become, be able to come out and really stand for what they stand for? How did Ron Paul become so popular? How did all of these, it was no longer politics as usual, and our system had been breaking down for a very long time, and nobody likes change. And the reason that the Anointed, as I call him, the reason he got in so easily was because people checked out. People were fed up. People said, I give up on both sides. It's just politics. And being back in Minneapolis at the time, even what were supposed conservatives in manufacturing, business people, even argued with me and said, yeah, but anything's better than what we've had. Anything. They didn't care. They didn't even question. They just said, he's bringing change. Anything has got to be better. And you're completely right. Look at how many people, look at Blog Talk itself exploded with people like ourselves that, I mean, that's how this radio show started. It started because I was watching Fox. I'd been writing my book, and I would sit at night. I would go to work during the day. I'd go to the gym, and then I'd come home, and I'd watch Fox on the big screen as I was writing, and I just got so fed up one day. I couldn't stand watching Fox anymore. The only one I watched was Glenn Beck. So when he wasn't on, I got so mad, so I started calling in to talk radio. And then I got fed up that, then I thought, why am I calling in? Why aren't I getting on and doing something? Because then at least if I'm doing something, at least then I can't walk around and complain. And if somebody says, well, what are you doing about it? Well, now I can say, well, this is what I'm doing. And I can lay my head down at night and say, well, at least I feel like I've done my part. And, when I look at you're completely right. Every time something happens, it gets us to become that much more involved, aware, prepared. I mean, when you talk about every time they threaten to take away our arms or enact another law, gun sales are through the ceiling, ammunition. Yeah. I mean, we're able to talk here, and it's not like we have people calling into us, or it's not like we're getting Facebook messages, or when I go out and talk and tell people what we're talking about on the show, people don't look at me and say, well, you guys are nuts, you're conspiracy theorists. I mean, this is spreading, and I love to hear that. I mean, the only way is through truth and educating, and then it takes us that are everyday people that go out and we do our part, and we engage people and we motivate people, and we get them to listen. Me, I just tend to take a little bit of a tougher stand. I mean, I threaten them. I sometimes threaten to use duct tape, but and then I take over the company man shack. I just walk in. I put the Bella, Dangelo, which, Alex, if you haven't checked out the website or anybody else that's listening, James redid the website, and you can sign up for a newsletter. You can contact us. You'll see all the guests. Alex, your bio is there, and it tells all the upcoming guests, and he's done a great job. But, we are gaining momentum. We're gaining ground. It always feels like you want so much more, but, it's a process. Look at where you came from and look at where we're at today. And, we only have 3 more years and 10 months. That's his last term anyways.
Yeah, but, Alex, to me, is somewhat hinting that he's just part of, he's just a puppet. To me, all these guys are just a bunch of stage actors and carrying out, based on what, they're being told.
Well, sure, but what I think we're all agreeing is that, and I've said this, I do believe, there's going to come a point within the 3 years, 10 months, that we're going to get a little bit louder, a little bit more adamant, and a little bit more getting our voices out there and saying, we're not going to take this anymore. There's only so much. Because think about this. Now it's finally really affecting people. It's not something that we're trying to convince them of. It's not something that they're watching on TV saying, when this becomes enacted, when this happens, it's in their paycheck. It's their scene. They can't avoid it. How many people have, I had the conversation just the other day, saying, why should I try and make more? It just means higher taxes. Why am I even staying here in the States? How many people do I know that are planning on leaving? And then when you start talking about what's going to happen when they dump all of these now legal to be illegal into an already crisis economy with people trying to just get jobs, get back to work. It's just, we're going to stand up and say we're just not going to take it. We're just going to be that much more bold and brazen because we can. What are they really going to do? There's more of us, and certainly in the administration, there's more of us, more armed and aware, and, the rest will stand there meekly, and, they're certainly not going to be standing there and fighting because, of course, they would be standing there and defending with little to say because they are in the system, hooked up to it, but I hold great hope.
What were you going to say, Alex, about them being puppets?
As far as I'm concerned, the establishment wing of both parties are just puppets. Like I said earlier, Bush the first is the one who got the ball on Agenda 21 rolling in the first place. So, and Obama is continuing to carry it out. Bush the first is the one who went on TV and told everyone we're building a new world order where the United Nations is going to be in charge. Sure. Then Bill Clinton, the next president, came on and said, I also want a new world order. And so it's a very clear pattern. But like you said earlier, you're doing something, I'm doing something, so we can all sleep at night. We can all tell our grandchildren, hey, even if we didn't win the battle, we did something, we tried our best. And at the moment, I'm not so sure that these people are going to get away with it because there's a lot of things in our favor. Like you were saying, people are waking up all the time. The sheriffs, now they're saying we're going to stand with the people. We are not going to let any federal officers come in here and disarm our citizens. The state legislatures are standing up and putting their foot down, nullifying unconstitutional laws. So we really do have a lot going our way, and at the same time, we can all sleep at night knowing that, we're doing, however small our part may be, we're each doing our little part to, do what we need to do, to keep our freedom, to serve God, to do whatever it is we need to do in life. And if we win, we win. If we don't, at least we tried our best, and I think there's a lot of reasons to be encouraged. So pay no attention to the puppet in the White House. Doesn't matter if he's a Republican or a Democrat at this point. I think we should focus on the House of Representatives and on our state legislatures.
Amen.
Yeah. So, if I could pick up a Swedish chick, tell me the best way to do it.
Actually, I met my wife studying in France, so that was my story. But I know there's a lot of Swedish girls in the States. Swedish girls like America for some reason, and I hear all the time, like, oh, I just got back from the U.S., or I'm going to the U.S. next week, or whatever. So I'm sure there's plenty around if you look hard enough.
Oh, that is way cool. Wow.
Mandingo, I thought you just had to, throw it over your shoulder and strut it around.
Yes, when you have, when you're well endowed, and you got three legs, sometimes, it's just being the ladies' man, I got to pay, pour my Cavassier, and I get my ways with them. So that just happens. But no, that's.
I love having you on tonight. I don't know what your schedule is like. I'm glad that I got introduced to you. I'm honored that you spent this time with us tonight. If you would want to come on the show again, I would love to have you. You've shared a lot of great information. I'm getting comments online if they're enjoying listening to you. So if you have time again, love to have you.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's keep in touch. And, if you guys want me back on again, I'd be delighted to appear. I had a good time and fun talking with you guys, and I hope the listeners are enjoying it as well. So just, let me know when you want me back on and what you want to talk about, and we'll make a plan.
Absolutely.
Alex,
the number that
quick.
I called, is that your, hang on 1 second, Mandingo. The number, Mandingo, you have his email, or you know him on Facebook or something.
No. I was going to ask Alex, how would I be able to find some of the articles that you're reading so I can somewhat repost them and talk about, how cool you are?
You mean the articles that I'm writing or whatever? Or?
Yeah. You said you wrote for the New American, right?
Yeah. I sent James a big list of articles that I had done related to Agenda 21. But
Okay.
if you go to the New American, for example, if you click on any article that I've written on, there's a little written by, and then it says my name, Alex Newman. If you click on the little thing there, it's like a hyperlink. If you click on where it says Alex Newman, it'll take you to the page with all of my recent articles. If you put my name into Google, you can find articles that I've written for other magazines. I've probably written for 10, 12, 15 magazines and newspapers in my, 7 or 8 years in journalism. But yeah, the New American, in my opinion, is the best magazine around. If you don't have a subscription to it, you should get it because it's a magazine by patriots, for patriots, and I mean, really, I started writing for them because I thought it was the best magazine around. They let me tell the truth, and it's not the New York Times, it's not the liberal media. We report the facts, and that's so. In my opinion, it's a good magazine. If you guys want to check it out, it's thenewamerican.com. And if you want to read any of my articles on there, just find one by me and click on Alex Newman, and you can see my whole list there. So.
Well, that's
fabulous.
awesome.
What I'm going to do is I'm sorry, Mandigo. Hang on one second. I'm going to find them, and on our website for the show, Chad and I and James and Eric as well. I like to post things, so with your permission, I'll certainly ask, but I like to add them to the website so that people can access when they go to Bella.com as well too.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds great. So.
His pen name is going to be Swedish Slayer, so that's what you got to do. Hey, very, very, very nice meeting you. And I really enjoy anybody that somewhat is at least validating, but much less, taking on the fight, that you have. And anything I can do, if you're in Texas, please feel free to shout.
Absolutely. If you guys make it across the pond, let me know, and let's definitely keep in touch. I really appreciate you guys having me on the show, and definitely appreciate the opportunity to tell people about some of these things that I think are really important. So.
Thank you, sir.
Well, we will definitely have you back on. Thank you, sir, and I look forward to talking to you offline.
Okay. Thanks so much, guys, and have a good one, huh?
Thanks, you too.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.